I had a quarter of the individuals had a bail of $2,000 or less. And when I looked at their offenses, you know, I can see clearly that they were able to make bail. They weren't arrested because they weren't major offenses. You know, they can still continue to work and provide for their families. They can continue that community and family involvement. And so that disconnect for me, overseeing 2 prisons or 2 jails, is something that's most concerning to me. So, you know, diversion, alternatives to incarceration programs for individuals with a minor offense, maybe they go through some classes. We have a lot of robust courts in Suffolk County. We have a veterans court for veterans. We have a youth court. You know, Judge Camacho, who was actually in Queens at one point, you know, is now with us. So we're trying to work with these populations, with those that have not committed serious crimes, so that they can regain their lives and be productive members. But I would love to reduce my jail population as much as I can, you know, through these alternative to incarceration programs.
Who drives that conversation in Suffolk County, Sheriff? I mean, you mentioned multiple systems, right? You're talking about probation, parole, the court system itself. How does that, you know, you said you got 21 different law enforcement agencies out there. Who's setting the policy? Where's it coming from?
So, you know, the policy obviously comes from Albany through the state courts, and then I have our Suffolk County District Attorney. But I feel as an elected official, it's incumbent upon me to at least start that conversation and push an agenda. You know, I feel very strongly that if an individual has a low bail and their offense is not a major offense, why not put them on an ankle monitoring program if we can do that? It's more cost effective than incarceration. They're still continued in their community. They're still able to work to support their families, and we're still monitoring them. So there is no risk. So that's something that I've been pushing for, because I have spoken to our district attorney and our courts, and it is something that they're looking at. But I feel anything that I feel is something that will be productive to help members of society that may have made a poor choice in a wrong circumstance at a particular time. If we can help them, we should help them.
Can I add something? I want to take a slightly different approach to answering this question, because I agree that the decriminalization of some minor offenses is very important, as was raising the age of incarceration in New York State from 16 to 18. And I want to put this in perspective as a generational problem. If we're, you know, as far as law enforcement is concerned, how this will enhance public safety. If in the course of my 30-year career, I chased Wayne Harris down the street at 16 years old and incarcerated him and then reincarcerated him, and then Wayne Harris goes off to have Wayne Harris Jr. and Wayne Harris Jr. because Wayne Harris can't find meaningful employment or go to college or get a mortgage. Wayne Harris has raised Wayne Harris Jr. to do the same thing. The problem that you have becomes generational, and it increases the workflow of any law enforcement agency facing that particular situation. Now, in Rochester, unfortunately for a city its size, we have a very, very high rate of poverty. We also have a very poor educational system, and up until recently, our age of incarceration, like the rest of New York State, was 16 years old. What's developed is a generational problem that has significantly increased the workload of the Rochester Police Department and every law enforcement agency in that area. So if we decriminalize the minor offenses, if we move forward with raising the age, and if we start to look at the key factors towards some of the issues that we're facing, like poverty, like poor education, like joblessness, then the workload of any agency facing a community that has those problems will begin to decrease.
Absolutely. And
You can clap. That was
yeah,
a clap.
right.
Somebody wanted to clap.
Don't hold back. This is what the conversation's about. So, and I think to dovetail off what you're saying, so it's not just about those upstream factors that are input into the generational sort of this gerbil wheel that we're on. It's also this notion that those things like mental health fall at the feet of law enforcement. Because we are the only thing open 24/7, 7 days a week, we are now finding ourselves dealing with those issues that are not our own. And when you ask the question about who should be leading those conversations, we should be bringing those partners, those education partners, housing, jobs to the table and being very clear about what law enforcement was designed to do and it was not designed to, find housing, to make sure folks are, in school. And I think that we've sort of allowed law enforcement to accept that responsibility, which is not our own. And it's time for us to push back on that notion that just because we're open, all hours, all holidays, we should be doing all of this work.
So just to piggyback over what the doctor said, when I think about the NCO program and those of you who are in commands or COs that have NCO precincts, that's one thing that we did with them. Training was imperative in order for the NCO program to work. And the reason being is exactly what the doctor said. We had to make sure that they were educated, that they met with all the different agencies represented in New York City, whether it's Adult Protective Services, whether it's ACS, just so they can make the proper referrals. That program is designed for them to take control, for them to be out there and conduct their own building block meetings. There's no supervisors attending those meetings with them. They're responsible for the attendance and who attends the meeting, and they're responsible for problem solving. There's a 3-week program, I think it is, the CIC course that's given. Each of those officers were given the CIC course, which is a detective-based course to teach them how to conduct their own investigations. They have companion cases with the detectives. They go out and look for additional evidence. I mean, it's a lot of work that they do, but I love it because it gives them a sense of ownership. And when you have a sense of ownership, you take pride in what you're doing.
Okay, we're gonna invite the audience to ask their questions. I got a couple more questions, but folks, think about what you might wanna ask our panel. I wanted to touch on the Concealed Carry Reciprocity Act. It's really about halfway through Congress. It's passed the House of Representatives. It's being debated. It's the #1 priority of the National Rifle Association. Should firearm permit holders be allowed to legally cross lines with concealed firearms? And does it enhance or endanger public safety as far as you're concerned?
Okay, so this is something I've been following for a while, and even when it passed the mark of 19 to 11, and when it was originally, the bill was drawn up by, I think it was someone in North Carolina, one of the representatives. And when you take a look at our reciprocity in 2017, to me it's kind of basically like a driver's license. If I can drive in New York, I can drive in Virginia, but it's carrying a weapon. These are law-abiding citizens, so when I speak to something, I like to drill down a little bit on the data. So I looked at how many times a license to carry, a CCW, concealed carry weapon, permit holder was arrested or got into some sort of trouble with the law. And I just looked at Florida, because Florida has, the United States alone has almost 17 million carry concealed weapon permits out there. Florida being the highest state, followed by Georgia, Pennsylvania, and I think Texas. So when I think about Florida, almost 2 million permit carriers, you had probably every per 100,000, maybe 10. And that was from 1987 to 2017. So that's a long time, about 30-year span. And it's quite interesting when you look at it, because then they reflected on police officers, right? We're licensed to carry. And how many of us get in trouble and we're permit holders? And the number was about 103 per 100,000 for a shorter period of time, like maybe 4 years. So I think about that, and I think about, will it hurt public safety? I know naturally there are about 14 states now, they say, that have no requirements, no background checks, nothing, in order to attain a permit. But when I think about, as far as it enhancing public safety, I know as an officer, we weren't allowed to cross in New Jersey, because New Jersey denied anyone's permit. And me as an officer, we have these firearms because of what we do for a living, but also it extends into self-defense or us being protected, right? We think about we want to protect our homes and protect our family. And so I have to think about that license, carry, concealed weapon, permit holder that's out there that's not law enforcement. And when I think about that, I'm not so sure that it would affect public safety, with the exception of the states that have no requirements.
That's what I'm talking about.
And that's what we're worried about.
So, and to piggyback off that, and coming from Colorado, we're a hunting state. I live in rural Colorado. It's very different than being in the city, right? And so I think that the interesting part about it is the attitudes and perspectives about carrying firearms vary depending on where you come from in the United States. And the ability for a state or a city to control that, even option or opportunity for interaction, has to be done on that ground and that local level. And I think that, and I love, the fact that you dig deep into it, but I guess what I'm not willing to is to take that chance. In rural communities, kids grow up with weapons. They learn how to be responsible. They go to classes. That's not the same in a lot of different states. And it doesn't take much more than being able to put an X for your name to get a license. That's problematic. And I think that you have to think about where you are and what we're asking folks to do and to behave when they come into the city. And I think that, you said this aptly earlier, crime is low. I think that I also know as being a social scientist, people have certain perceptions about certain people and believe they need to carry weapons for a reason. And I think that we have to be mindful that, how we grow up around weapons also impacts how we see other people. And so I always think about that in the back of my mind, and being law enforcement, having all of us have concealed carries, it's interesting that we seem to be getting more trouble than citizens. But it also may be an indicator that something was going on prior to that. But I think that we have to be mindful about how we're introducing those things into different parts of the community and different parts of in different cities. I just think it's very different depending where you're from.
I'll put the DA's hat on if I might. Brooklyn DA Gonzalez, as well as the other 4 DAs in the other 4 boroughs and others around the country as a coalition, have spoken out against this. I mean, it's clear for us here in New York City, particularly in Brooklyn, we had the largest gun arrest last year in March of last year. We retrieved 217 weapons, the largest seizure with the NYPD partnership in the history of Brooklyn. Now, that is because those guns are coming from another part of the country, through the Iron Pipeline, as we call it. And we're finding that a lot of people are just feeling that they can bring the weapons that are from other places up here. Now, whether they're legal or not, they're still coming up here, they're being used illegally, right? So we have to be careful that we don't just open up this sieve and say, okay, come on in, bring your guns, and then we have to then, distill who those people are. I'd rather have nobody doing it than everybody saying they can do it. And, the scenario that Commissioner O'Neill put forth with having, this pass and having Times Square be,